This is my son, who is a third generation tile setter. Pretty soon there might be 4 generations. But I wanted to interview him to get some of his most fondest memories, or maybe not so fondest, of my father, who he's been on some tile jobs with. So KJ, you want to start anywhere you want to?
Well, I can only tell you the funny ones that I have done with him. I remember Grandpa, I guess back in the day, I guess late 80s and very early 90s, as I guess back then it was a big deal to put in 4 1/4 and 12 by 12s and Corey tile. Grandpa would nip bunny rabbits out of 4 1/4, which Greg and Ian, they all know that.
Well, what is a bunny rabbit? Tell us, Green.
A rabbit that's in the yard, he would take a pair of nippers and he would nip it out of 4 1/4, a bunny rabbit. And then...
You mean to make a design out of the tile?
No, just nip a rabbit. He would take the 4 1/4 and he'd nip around it, make it look like a bunny rabbit.
Oh. Okay.
And then people like him and Jasper would play funny games with young guys. What they would do is they would take the 4 1/4 and they would score it on a cutting board, and they would hold 3 of them together and tell a young guy to see if they could snap 3 pieces of 4 1/4 together. But the young guy's 4 1/4 wouldn't be scored on the cutting board, and they couldn't do it. And Grandpa and people like Jasper would break all 3 of them. They would look really strong, but it's just because they scored it on the cutting board.
That is hilarious. I've never heard these stories.
Mm-hmm. Another time is that a funny story, has a lot to do with Diane. Hilarious. She had this Volkswagen Rabbit.
I wish she still had it.
And I didn't have a license. And coming from, I guess, Florida, where everything's gridded out and there's only 2 roads, going from there, or even from the Northern Neck or something, up to the Beltway, the second worst traffic in history, we would drive to BWI Airport. We would leave at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and we drive all the way to BWI Airport in that Volkswagen Rabbit. And Grandpa would never put that son of a bitch in 4th gear. That thing would be topped out in 3rd gear, whining.
Did you tell him what he was doing wrong?
And I'd have to say, push on the clutch, Hugo, Grandpa.
Did Diane know this?
Yeah, she knows
She
this.
knew it, okay.
And I'd switch it into 4th. And every night we left BWI Airport for 5 months, he would ask, how do we get home, asshole? How do we get home?
He's not used to
every single night.
He's not used to those fancy roads.
You know, and being...
Diane let him drive that Volkswagen?
It was me and him.
Oh.
And this is when Grandma and Grandpa were in pretty decent health. Stuff like that. Remember many stories. And every time we get back home in the morning, we'd leave there about 6 in the morning. And every time we got home, I don't care what Grandma had going on, she always had breakfast made.
Now, are you talking about when you do Morgantown Community College? Is that what you're reflecting about?
No, that's BWI Airport.
She was there too? Did y'all stay in a motel?
She wasn't on the damn job. She stayed in Vienna with Greg and them.
Okay.
We all lived in the same house.
But I know when you went to Morgantown, you all got hotels.
Yes, but we're talking about in Vienna. Another thing that Grandpa would do is, I guess at that time, I was 18. Grandpa's probably 59, maybe 60. And he would recognize, we worked there at nighttime, and I don't know anything about sports, could care less about it. My girlfriend knows more about that shit than any man. Wish they thought they knew. And he would recognize all these golf players and all these people come there in the middle of the night. And it could be a guy the same age as Grandpa. And he would ask them, and they would be these famous people flying in the middle of the night. And Grandpa would always come, how'd you do, son? Or what's going on, son?
Were they on private commuter jets or on a regular, like...
They were on regular whatever jets, but Grandpa knew all of them. He knows a lot about sports. One time we came through there and I seen all the WWF wrestlers come through there in the middle of the night. Another thing about Grandpa is, even at that age, he sure knew what a good woman looked like. Winnie Barefoot would always have these ridiculous people that had no business being anywhere near a construction site. These weird church-going people. One of them was this military lady she definitely wasn't good looking, but she had a little round butt. She was thin. And Grandpa would always get behind her about 5 or 10 feet back and putting in that carpet tile. He'd always look up about every 20 minutes. And he'd always
my
look
mother
up.
is gone.
He would always look up and smile at me and stuff like that. And I knew what that was about. So funny. So funny.
But you got any Morgantown stories or West Virginia?
Oh, I got plenty more jokes.
Did you know that he tiled the school for the blind in Romney, West Virginia? Did you know that? You need to go in there. Did he ever tell you about that? That was like back in the mid-50s.
I'll tell you another story about another good man that is very, very well off in the tile business. Has a huge tile company that adapted over the years. You know, if you've been in the tile company for more than 15 or 20 years, and if you can do that fantastic or wonderful, and you're not into doing everything else, you know, putting in a couple cabinets or arranging some granite being installed or doing some plumbing and stuff like that, you're really limiting yourself. But Judd, who owns Judd, would tell me stories about Grandpa. Grandpa and I guess his brother were so big that they were tall enough. People didn't have vans back then. They had stake bed trucks with sand and shit on there. They didn't have Durarock and all that fancy shit we have now. That he was tall enough to lean backwards over on a dump truck, which, you know, stake bed truck, and grab a 50-gallon barrel backwards with his hand like this, half filled full of water, and pull that out of the back truck. I'm gonna tell you what, you gotta be a big boy to do that shit. And he would tell me stuff like that. Just how
someone told me that my father's hands were so big, he could take a stack of tiles and throw them on the wall.
I don't know if that's a
it's a myth.
No, I don't know if that's a myth, but that's a thing that tile setters use to brag and say things. But one thing I always say about Grandpa, I never saw him drink anything my whole life until one time
He never drank on the job.
I don't know if he did that, whatever. I'm just telling you, the only time I ever saw